In the glittering world of the ultra-rich, betrayal is just another transaction. But for billionaire Jason Hawthorne, he's about to find out that the price of deceit is everything he has. And the one cashing in is the woman he scorned. This is the story of how a king lost his empire, and a queen took her throne. But for billionaire financier Jason Hawthorne, it was about to taste of ash. Back in New York, his wife, the elegant and dangerously intelligent Callie, had just made a call. And with that one call, Jason Hawthorne, the king of his own universe, was about to discover that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Especially one who knows the password to every offshore account. The Gulfstream G650 descended towards Mustique with the silent grace of a predator. Jason Hawthorne, a man whose net worth was as vast and fluid as the ocean beneath him, barely glanced at the spectacle. His attention was consumed by the woman beside him. Her hair, the color of dark honey, cascaded over the creamy leather of the jet seat. She was 24, a former art gallery assistant who now curated a life of unimaginable luxury, courtesy of Jason. "It's even more beautiful than you described, Jules," she murmured, her fingers tracing the condensation on her champagne flute. "The best for you, my love," Jason replied, his voice a low rumble of satisfaction. At 52, he was still a formidable presence. He had the kind of ruthless charm that made people feel privileged to be in his orbit, even as he was exploiting them. The private airstrip on Mustique was a sliver of asphalt carved into the lush landscape. A custom-built electric golf cart, emblazoned with the crest of their villa, Serenity's End, was waiting. Jason had purchased the sprawling 10-acre estate a decade ago, not just as a vacation home, but as a tangible symbol of his ascent. It was his fortress of solitude, his playground, and now the stage for his latest indiscretion. Serenity's End was a marvel of modern architecture. An infinity pool bled into the horizon, and a private white sand beach sloped gently down to a secluded cove. The staff, a discreet team of locals who knew the value of silence, greeted them with cool towels and rum punch. For the rest of the day, Jason played the part of the magnanimous host. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, they sat on the veranda. "To us," Jason said, raising his glass of vintage Dom Perignon. "To us," Anastasia echoed, her eyes shimmering in the candlelight. But as she leaned in to kiss him, her gaze flickered for a fraction of a second towards the mainland, a dark, distant shape on the horizon. Meanwhile, 6,000 miles away in the heart of Manhattan, Callie Hawthorne was seated in the library of their Park Avenue penthouse. It was a violation, a desecration of a sacred space. But it wasn't just the sentimental attachment to the island that fueled her cold fury. It was the audacity, the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it. She had used her dormant legal skills to meticulously trace the labyrinthian network of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and blind trusts that constituted the Hawthorne fortune. He had forgotten that the most dangerous opponent is the one you never see coming. She took a sip of her oolong tea, her movements calm and deliberate. Her laptop was open on the polished mahogany desk, displaying a series of encrypted files. The final piece of her plan had fallen into place an hour ago. It was of Jason and Anastasia laughing as they boarded the golf cart at Mustique's airstrip. The image was a confirmation, but also an insult. It was a message from her lead lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, a shrewd, silver-haired veteran of Wall Street's bloodiest legal battles. "All systems are go, Callie. On your command. Execute." Then she closed her laptop, stood up, and walked over to the large window that overlooked the glittering expanse of Central Park. But as of this moment, he was a king in a gilded cage, blissfully unaware that the bars were about to slam shut. Back on Mustique, Jason and Anastasia had retired to the master suite. They made love with a practiced passion, a performance of desire that had become their currency. He was Jason Hawthorne, a master of the universe. And in his universe, the sun always rose on another perfect day. A day of reckoning. The sun, a mercilessly cheerful orb in the cerulean sky, streamed through the glass walls of the master suite at Serenity's End. Jason awoke slowly, a languid stretch rippling through his well-maintained physique. He felt the familiar, pleasant ache of a night well spent. He allowed himself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. This was his life, a life he had built with his own 2 hands, his own cunning mind. He swiped the screen, his thumb tracing the familiar pattern to unlock it. He placed it on the wireless charging pad and padded naked to the ensuite bathroom, a cavernous space of Italian marble and chrome. A light breakfast on the terrace, a mid-morning sail, perhaps a call to his London office to gloat about the weather. 40 minutes later, showered, shaved, and dressed in a pair of crisp linen trousers and a polo shirt, he returned to the bedroom. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, leaning down to kiss her. It was now showing a 20% charge. He unlocked it, and his world began to unravel. Emails, text messages, missed calls. The subject lines were a frantic staccato of urgency. Immediate action required. He opened the first email, the one from his Swiss banker, a man named Klaus Richter, with whom he'd had a relationship built on discretion and mutual profit for over 2 decades. The message was brief and brutal. "Dear Mr. Hawthorne, pursuant to a legally executed order received from the signatory with full power of attorney, Callie Vance Hawthorne, all assets held in accounts associated with your name and your affiliated entities at this institution have been placed under an immediate and indefinite administrative freeze. All access, including electronic transfers, withdrawals, and credit lines, has been suspended pending further instruction from Mrs. Hawthorne. We are legally bound to comply with this directive. I am available to discuss the procedural aspects of this matter, but I must stress that the freeze itself is non-negotiable from our end." He scrolled frantically through the other messages. His trading accounts were frozen. His corporate credit cards were declined. His personal lines of credit were severed. It was a digital guillotine, and the blade had fallen with swift, silent precision. Anastasia was sitting up now, the silk sheet pulled around her waist. The concern in her voice was edged with something else, a nascent anxiety. He scrambled to make a call, his fingers fumbling on the screen. He tried to call Marcus Thorne, his own lawyer, a man he paid a king's ransom to protect him from exactly this kind of disaster. Of course. Callie had thought of everything. The Hawthorne family mobile plan was under a corporate account, an account she now controlled. Panic, raw and visceral, began to claw at his throat. It shattered with a satisfyingly violent crack, but the gesture did nothing to quell the rising tide of his fury and fear. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. He had expected a tearful phone call, a demand for a new, obscenely expensive piece of jewelry as a penance. Not this. This was scorched earth. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder, harder. It was calculation. "What do you mean, Callie?" Anastasia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What did she do?" "She froze everything," he snarled, turning to face her. "The accounts, the cards, everything." "But how can she do that?" she stammered. "Power of attorney," he spat. "I gave it to her years ago. A damn formality." He ran his hands through his hair, his composure completely gone. "I have to get off this island. I have to get to New York." He stormed out of the bedroom, Anastasia scrambling to follow him, pulling on a silk robe. He found the villa's manager, a calm, unflappable man named Mr. Baptiste, arranging a bouquet of hibiscus on a console table in the main living area. "Baptiste!" Jason barked, his voice a roar of urgency. "I need the jet. Now. Ready the airstrip." Mr. Baptiste looked at him with an expression of polite regret. "I am very sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but that will not be possible." "What do you mean, not possible?" Jason demanded, his voice rising to a dangerous pitch. "I own the jet. I pay your salary. Get it done." I received an email this morning, sir, Mr. Baptiste said, his gaze unwavering. From Mrs. Hawthorne's office. The flight crew has been recalled to New York. The jet is no longer at our disposal. Furthermore, sir, all operational expenses for Serenity's End, including staff salaries and supplies, are to be billed directly to Mrs. Hawthorne's new primary account. We have been instructed not to extend any further credit to you personally. The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow. He was not just a prisoner. He was a guest in a home that was no longer his. He was stranded, penniless, and utterly, completely at his wife's mercy. He looked around the magnificent room, at the priceless art on the walls, the stunning view of the sea, the very air thick with the scent of his own success. It was all a mirage. The gilded cage had become a real one. Just then, a member of the staff entered, carrying a silver tray. On it was a single, sealed envelope. This was delivered by special courier from the mainland this morning, Mr. Hawthorne, the staff member said. Jason snatched the envelope. His name was written on the front in Callie's elegant, familiar script. His heart pounded as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. The message was short, but it was the most devastating blow of all. Jason, enjoying the view? I've always found it so inspiring. It gives one such a sense of perspective. By the way, I took the liberty of changing the Wi-Fi password. It's now Namoresecrets. All one word, lowercase. I'll be in touch. Callie. He stared at the note, his hands trembling. The cruelty of it, the sheer, calculated brilliance, was breathtaking. She hadn't just cut off his money. She had cut off his connection to the world, his ability to fight back. She had left him with nothing but a Wi-Fi password that was a constant, mocking reminder of his own folly. He sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold, terrifying emptiness. The sun was high in the sky now, the day in full, glorious swing. But for Jason Hawthorne, the world had gone dark. He was a millionaire on a private island, and he was, for the first time in his adult life, utterly and completely broke. The silence of paradise was now the sound of his own ruin. In the silent, air-conditioned chill of her Park Avenue library, Callie Hawthorne monitored the fallout with the dispassionate focus of a chess grandmaster. Her screens displayed a complex web of financial data, legal communications, and market reactions. The freezing of Jason's assets had sent minor but noticeable tremors through certain financial circles. Whispers were starting. A titan was stumbling. Marcus Thorne, her lawyer, sat opposite her, a file of documents open on his lap. He had been a friend of her father's, and his loyalty was to the woman he had known since she was a precocious teenager, not to the husband she had married. The initial phase is complete, Callie, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. The assets are secured. He's completely locked out. We've also filed for a temporary restraining order, citing financial misappropriation, which will prevent him from attempting to open new lines of credit or liquidate any undeclared assets we might have missed. Good, Callie said, her eyes not leaving the screen. What about Hawthorne Holdings? That's the delicate part, Marcus admitted. Jason is the face and the primary stakeholder. The board is already panicking. They're calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. You, as the holder of his proxy and now the controller of his majority shares, will be expected to attend. Callie finally looked at him. I'll be there. They will not be friendly, Marcus warned. You're walking into a viper's nest. They see you as the vengeful wife, not a corporate leader. Let them, Callie said, a flicker of steel in her eyes. They've profited from his recklessness for years. It's time they were introduced to a more stable form of management. Her phone rang. It was a private number, one she had been waiting for. She motioned for Marcus to stay as she answered, putting the call on speaker. This is Callie Hawthorne. A man's voice with a faint, unplaceable European accent replied, "Mrs. Hawthorne. My name is Nikolai. I believe you were expecting my call." Nikolai was a ghost, a specialist in a field that didn't officially exist. He was a forensic investigator of the digital and financial underworld, a man who could find anything and anyone for the right price. Callie had engaged his services 6 months ago. "Nikolai," she said, her voice even. "Do you have it?" "I do," he confirmed. "It was as you suspected, well hidden. A labyrinth of trusts registered in the Cayman Islands, funneling into a numbered account in Liechtenstein, all under a holding company named Dubois Acquisitions." Callie's expression didn't change, but Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Dubois," he mouthed silently. "Anastasia's surname." "And the beneficiary?" Callie asked. "The sole beneficiary is a Miss Anastasia Dubois, contingent upon her cohabitation with Mr. Hawthorne for a period of no less than 5 years, or upon his death," Nikolai explained. "It's a substantial trust, Mrs. Hawthorne, in the region of $50 million. He was setting her up for life." There it was, the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't just the affair, the casual flings she had learned to compartmentalize. This was a plan, a future, a replacement. The trust was funded by the sale of pre-IPO shares from a tech company Jason backed 2 years ago, Nikolai continued. "An asset he never declared in your shared portfolio. I have the full transaction history. It's a clear case of marital asset concealment." "Thank you, Nikolai," Callie said calmly. "Transfer the files to the encrypted server we discussed. Your final payment has been authorized." She ended the call. The room was silent for a moment. "50 million, Marcus breathed, shaking his head. The unmitigated gall. "It's not about the money, Marcus," Callie said, her voice dangerously quiet. "It's the premeditation. This wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy." She looked at the photo of Jason and Anastasia still on her desk, the laughing, carefree couple. They weren't just on vacation. They were celebrating their future. A new, harder resolve settled over her. This was no longer just about teaching Jason a lesson. It was about dismantling the empire he had built on a foundation of lies. Back on Mystique, the initial shock had given way to a grim, suffocating reality. The paradise of yesterday had become a prison. The attentive staff now moved around Jason with a polite but distinct distance. They still served him his meals, but the warmth was gone. He was no longer the master of the house. He was a problem to be managed. Anastasia had retreated into a sullen silence. The dream had evaporated, and she was left with the terrifying prospect of a future she hadn't planned for. Her beauty was her only real currency, and its value was inextricably linked to the patronage of powerful men. With Jason's downfall, her own stock was plummeting. "There has to be something you can do," she said for the 10th time that day. They were sitting on the veranda, the untouched lunch growing cold between them. "What would you have me do, Anastasia?" Jason snapped, his patience worn thin. "Swim to the mainland? Send a message in a bottle? You're Jason Hawthorne. You know people, powerful people," she insisted, her voice rising with a note of hysteria. "My powerful people can't be reached on a phone that doesn't work with a credit card that's been declined," he roared. "Don't you understand? She's cut me off at the knees." He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him. He felt old, tired, and for the first time in his life, utterly powerless. His thoughts drifted back to Callie. Not the cold, calculating woman who had engineered his downfall, but the brilliant, fiery young lawyer he had first met at a fundraiser 2 decades ago. He had been captivated by her intelligence, her wit, her unassailable sense of self. He had pursued her relentlessly, seeing her as the ultimate acquisition, the perfect partner to legitimize his new money and build a dynasty. He had won her, married her, and then, over the years, he had slowly, carelessly taken her for granted. He had put her on a pedestal, admired her as a beautiful object, and forgotten about the formidable mind that lay behind the elegant facade. He had forgotten who she was. A memory surfaced, unbidden. They were on this very island years ago. Their son, Thomas, was 5, and their daughter, Chloe, was 3. They were building a sandcastle, and Jason, ever the ambitious builder, was trying to create an elaborate structure with turrets and moats. But the dry sand kept collapsing. It was Callie who had shown him the simple trick of mixing the sand with water to give it structure. "You can't build anything lasting on a weak foundation, Jason," she had said, her words light but her meaning clear. He had laughed it off at the time. Now, the memory felt like a prophecy. His empire, his life, was a sandcastle built on a foundation of deceit. And Callie had just kicked it over. Desperate, he remembered the villa's satellite phone, a piece of emergency equipment he hadn't thought about in years. It was kept in the study, in a locked safe. He found Mr. Baptiste and demanded the key. The manager, after a moment of hesitation, complied. The instructions from Mrs. Hawthorne had been about financial credit, not about a dusty old piece of hardware. Jason's hands trembled as he dialed the number for his New York office, bypassing the switchboard and calling his CFO, David Chen, directly on his private line. Chen was a numbers man, loyal only to the bottom line. "David," Jason said, his voice urgent. "It's Jason Hawthorne." There was a pause on the other end. "Jason, where are you? The board is in chaos." "Listen to me, David. Callie has gone insane. She's frozen everything. I need you to bypass her. Set up a new corporate account, transfer funds, do whatever you have to do. I'll make it worth your while. A 7-figure bonus, now." The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Jason could hear the faint sound of typing. "I'm sorry, Jason," David said finally, his voice cold and formal. "I can't do that." "What do you mean you can't?" Jason bellowed. "I'm the CEO. According to the documents I received this morning from Marcus Thorne," David said, his voice devoid of emotion, "you are the majority shareholder. However, your voting rights and all executive powers have been legally transferred, via your power of attorney, to Callie Hawthorne. She is, for all intents and purposes, the new CEO of Hawthorne Holdings. The board is meeting with her tomorrow to formalize the transition. Any instruction I take from you would be illegal." The phone slipped from Jason's hand and clattered onto the desk. CEO. She had not just taken his money. She had taken his company, his identity, his life's work. Furthermore, David added, his voice a final, dispassionate nail in the coffin, "Mrs. Hawthorne has already been in contact. She's authorized a full, independent audit of all executive accounts and expenses for the last 10 years. She specifically mentioned a forensic look into the pre-IPO sale of your shares in a company called Innovate AI." Jason's blood ran cold. Innovate AI. The source of the funds for Anastasia's secret trust. She knew. She knew everything. This was no longer a marital dispute. This was a corporate takeover. A coup d'état. And he was not just an exiled king. He was a potential criminal. He stumbled out of the study and onto the veranda, the brilliant Caribbean sun feeling like a spotlight on his humiliation. Anastasia looked up at him, her face a mask of anxious hope. "Did you get through? Is it fixed?" He just stared at her, the architect of his ruin, the $50 million woman. He looked at her youthful beauty, the carefully constructed artifice of her charm, and he felt nothing. No desire, no anger, just a vast, empty wasteland of regret. "Pack your bags, Anastasia," he said, his voice hollow. "Are we leaving?" she asked, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. "You are," he said, looking out at the endless, indifferent sea. "I'm not sure about me." He finally understood. Callie hadn't just stranded him on a private island. She had put him in a beautifully appointed cage and thrown away the key. And the name of the cage was Mystique. He was trapped in paradise, with nothing but the ghost of the man he used to be. The emergency board meeting of Hawthorne Holdings was convened in a room that radiated power. Located on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of Wall Street, the boardroom featured a gargantuan mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, chairs upholstered in dark gray leather, and a panoramic view of the financial district. It was a concrete jungle where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. The air was thick with tension and testosterone. The board consisted of 10 men, a collection of grizzled industry veterans, slick corporate lawyers, and hard-nosed financiers. They were men who had ridden the wave of Jason Hawthorne's aggressive, often brutal, business strategies to immense personal wealth. They were loyal to Jason, but more so, they were loyal to the status quo, to the river of money that flowed from his ventures. And now, a foreign element was being introduced into their ecosystem. They were waiting for Callie Hawthorne. The whispers had been flying all morning. Jason was incommunicado. His assets were frozen. His wife, the society hostess, the woman who organized charity galas, was making a power play. The consensus was that this was a domestic squabble writ large, an embarrassment that needed to be contained quickly. They would placate her, offer a generous settlement, and get things back to normal. The double doors of the boardroom opened, and Callie walked in. She was not the woman they expected. She was not clad in a demure dress, but in a sharply tailored, dark navy pantsuit that spoke of authority. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She was flanked by Marcus Thorne and 2 other lawyers from his firm, who moved with the quiet confidence of people who knew they held all the cards. Callie took her place at the head of the table, the seat that had always been Jason's, the seat that by proxy was now hers. The room fell silent. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and clear, resonating with an authority they had never heard from her before. "Thank you for assembling on such short notice. I know there are many questions. Let me be direct. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, I have taken full operational and financial control of Jason Hawthorne's personal and corporate assets, including his majority stake in this company." A man named Robert Harrison, a portly, red-faced industrialist who was one of Jason's oldest allies, spoke first. "Now see here, Callie," he began, his tone condescending. "We all understand this is a difficult time, a personal matter, but this company is a multi-billion-dollar entity. You can't just—" "I can," Callie interrupted, her gaze sharp as a razor. "And I have. This is no longer a personal matter, Robert. This is a matter of corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. For the past 48 hours, my team has been conducting a preliminary review of the company's financials. What we found is concerning." She nodded to Marcus, who placed a sleek black folder in front of each board member. "Inside these folders," Callie continued, "you will find evidence of what my lawyers have termed gross financial mismanagement. You will find details of undeclared shell corporations, the use of corporate funds for personal expenses on a truly staggering scale, and the channeling of company profits into high-risk, personal side ventures without board knowledge or approval." The board members began to flip through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock, and then to a dawning, horrified understanding. The whispers died, replaced by the rustle of paper. "I draw your attention to page 5, Callie said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing them in. "It details the sale of pre-IPO shares in a tech company called Innovate AI, an asset that belonged to Hawthorne Holdings. The proceeds of that sale, approximately $53 million, were not reinvested into this company. They were diverted into a private trust registered in Liechtenstein. The sole beneficiary of this trust is a Miss Anastasia Dubois." The name hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Some of the men in the room had met Anastasia at company events. They knew who she was. The dots connected with sickening speed. This wasn't just infidelity. This was embezzlement. Jason Hawthorne has used this company as his personal piggy bank, Callie stated, her voice now ringing with cold fury. He has exposed all of you, and our shareholders, to enormous legal and financial risk. The SEC would have a field day with this, not to mention the IRS. The mood in the room had shifted completely. The Vipers were no longer looking at her. They were looking at each other, their faces pale. The condescension was gone, replaced by fear. They were thinking of their own fortunes, their own reputations, their own potential complicity. "This is a catastrophe," mumbled another board member, a man named Henderson. "No," Callie countered, her voice firm. "It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Today is the course correction. As of this moment, Hawthorne Holdings is under new leadership. My leadership. We will conduct a full, transparent, and brutal audit of every department. We will claw back every misappropriated dollar. We will cut off the dead wood and restructure from the top down. We will restore integrity and stability to this company. And we will not only survive, we will become stronger and more profitable than ever before." She paused, letting her words sink in. She looked at each man, meeting their gaze, daring them to challenge her. "You have a choice, gentlemen," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "You can fight me, and I will dissolve this board and install a new one by the end of the week. Or, you can work with me. You can help me clean up the mess your friend and former CEO has made. Your positions and your considerable stock options will be secure, provided you are willing to embrace a new era of transparency and accountability." It was a masterstroke. She had shown them the abyss, then offered them a lifeline. She wasn't just the vengeful wife. She was their savior. She was offering them amnesty in exchange for allegiance. Robert Harrison, the man who had tried to patronize her just minutes before, cleared his throat. "Callie. Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his tone now one of deep respect. "What do you need from us?" The coup was complete. Meanwhile, on Mustique, Jason had managed to find a way to make an outbound call using the villa's landline, billing it to a sympathetic hotelier on a neighboring island who owed him a favor from years past. His first call was not to a lawyer or a banker, but to his son, Thomas. Thomas was 22, a recent graduate of Wharton, and possessed his mother's sharp intellect, though it was tempered by a youthful idealism that Jason had never quite understood. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's lawyers are everywhere. They're saying." "Listen to me, Thomas," Jason said, his voice low and urgent. "Your mother has lost her mind. She's trying to destroy me. To destroy everything I've built for you and Chloe." There was a pause on the other end. "She says you stole from the company, Dad. That you set up a secret trust for your girlfriend." The bluntness of the accusation, coming from his own son, was like a punch to the gut. "It's complicated, Thomas. It's business. Your mother doesn't understand." "I think she understands perfectly," Thomas replied, his voice cold. "I saw the documents, Dad. I'm at the office. She asked me to help with the audit." Jason felt a fresh wave of despair wash over him. She had turned his own son against him. She was not just dismantling his empire, she was erasing him from his own family. "Thomas, you're my son," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You have to help me." "Help you do what, Dad?" Thomas asked, and there was a genuine, painful confusion in his voice. "Help you hide more money. Help you lie to my mother. The woman you were supposed to love and protect. The woman who gave up her own career for you. She did this to herself." Jason roared, the desperation making him cruel. "She knew the deal." "No, Dad," Thomas said, his voice hardening with a resolve that sounded eerily like his mother's. "You knew the deal. You had a wife who was your partner in every sense of the word, and you treated her like an accessory. You had a family, And you gambled it all away for? For what? A younger model on a private island? I'm sorry, Dad, but you're on your own. The line went dead. Jason stood there, the receiver in his hand, the dial tone a mournful, mocking sound. He had lost his company. He had lost his son. He looked over at Anastasia, who was now frantically packing her designer luggage, a vulture picking at the carcass of their affair. He realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that he had nothing left to lose. But Callie had made one miscalculation. A man with nothing left to lose is a dangerous man. He is unpredictable. And as the sun set on another day in his gilded prison, new, desperate plan began to form in Jason Hawthorne's mind. If he couldn't get his empire back, he would do the next best thing. He would burn it to the ground. The news of Callie Hawthorne's boardroom coup spread through the elite circles of New York and London like wildfire. The initial narrative of a simple domestic dispute was quickly replaced by a more complex and compelling story. The quiet, elegant wife had revealed herself to be a corporate shark of the highest order. Callie, once a fixture on the society pages, was now a subject of fascination in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. She was no longer Mrs. Jason Hawthorne. She was Callie Vance Hawthorne, the interim CEO of a rebranded and suddenly intriguing Hawthorne Holdings. She worked with relentless, surgical precision. The audit she had initiated was unearthing years of Jason's financial sleight of hand. She fired executives who were too deeply embedded in Jason's culture of corruption and promoted bright, overlooked talent from within the company. She met with bankers, reassured investors, and in a move of pure strategic brilliance, she scheduled a sit-down interview with a respected female journalist known for her tough, incisive profiles. She was controlling the narrative, recasting herself from the scorned woman to the savvy savior of a company on the brink. She also took care of the Anastasia problem. Marcus Thorne, on her instruction, sent a curt legal notice to the villa on Mustique. It informed Miss Dubois that the prenuptial agreement she thought she had with Jason, the $50 million trust, was now the subject of a criminal investigation into the fraudulent concealment of marital assets. Any attempt to access the funds would be met with immediate legal action. It also included a one-way, economy-class plane ticket from St. Vincent to her hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, valid for the next 72 hours. The message was clear: the party was over. On Mustique, the arrival of the legal notice and the plane ticket sent Anastasia into a final, panicked spiral. She turned on Jason, her carefully constructed mask of adoration crumbling to reveal the raw, grasping ambition beneath. "You ruined me," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the now sterile villa. "That money was mine. You promised me." Jason, who was now operating on a strange, almost detached level of consciousness, looked at her with a kind of weary pity. "It was never your money, Anastasia. It was my wife's. You were just the rental, and the lease is up." The cruelty of his words, and the truth behind them, silenced her. Within hours, she was gone. Mr. Baptiste arranged for a boat to take her to the main island of St. Vincent to catch her flight. As Jason watched her disappear over the horizon, he felt nothing. No sense of loss, no relief, just a vast, echoing emptiness. He was truly alone now, a ghost rattling around in the opulent mausoleum of his former life. The staff continued to feed him and maintain the property, all on Callie's dime. He was her prisoner, a living testament to her victory. He spent his days pacing the white sand beach, the Wi-Fi password "Nomere Secrets" a constant, ironic torment. But in his isolation, Jason's mind, the same mind that had built a billion-dollar empire, was not idle. It was turning, calculating, searching for one final, desperate move. He couldn't win, he knew that. Callie had outmaneuvered him at every turn. But he could still unleash chaos. He could still inflict pain. He still had one secret left. It was a secret buried deep in the foundations of Hawthorne Holdings. A piece of information so toxic, so dangerous, that he had never even committed it to paper. It was a ghost from his past, a deal he had made at the very beginning of his career. A deal that had given him his initial seed capital but had made him a silent partner in something deeply illicit. Years ago, when he was just a hungry, ambitious trader, he had facilitated a massive, off-the-books currency trade for a Russian oligarch named Dmitry Volkov. Volkov was not just a wealthy businessman. He was a key figure in a shadowy syndicate, a man with deep ties to organized crime and a reputation for unspeakable brutality. The deal had been dirty, a way for Volkov to launder hundreds of millions of dollars out of Russia. Jason's reward had been a quiet, untraceable $10 million, the money he had used to start his own firm. He had justified it as a one-time sin, the necessary evil that had paved the way for his legitimate success. He had buried the memory and his connection to Volkov so deep he had almost convinced himself it never happened. But Volkov never forgot. And Volkov did not like his business partners airing their dirty laundry in the Wall Street Journal. Using the last of the favors he was owed, Jason managed to get a message out through a chain of intermediaries. It was a simple message, delivered to a specific lawyer in Cyprus who worked for Volkov. The message was, Callie Hawthorne's audit of Hawthorne Holdings is about to uncover the Genesis transaction. She is a threat to our mutual interests. It was the financial equivalent of pulling the pin on a grenade and leaving it in the boardroom. He had no idea what Volkov would do. Maybe nothing. Maybe something terrible. It was a roll of the dice, an act of pure, nihilistic destruction. If he was going down, he would pull the entire temple down with him. A few days later, Callie was leaving the Hawthorne Holdings building late at night. She was tired but invigorated. The restructuring was working. The stock was stabilizing. She had proven herself. As she walked towards her waiting car, two men in dark suits stepped out of the shadows. They were large, impassive, and they moved with an unnerving, professional calm. Her driver, a former police officer, immediately tensed. "Mrs. Hawthorne, get in the car." But one of the men was already holding the door, his other hand inside his jacket. He didn't smile. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his English thick with a Russian accent. "Mr. Volkov sends his regards. He is an old friend of your husband's. He has some concerns about your recent activities. He would like a meeting to discuss the past." A chill colder than any she had felt during the entire ordeal ran down Callie's spine. Volkov. She didn't know the name, but she understood the tone. This was not a corporate negotiation. This was a threat of a different order of magnitude. She realized with sickening clarity what Jason had done. Cornered and defeated, he had unleashed a monster. He had reached back into the darkest chapter of his past and sicked it on her. This was no longer about money or infidelity or corporate control. This was about survival. Callie, ever the strategist, showed no fear. She looked the man in the eye, her expression unreadable. "Tell Mr. Volkov," she said, her voice steady, "that I am always happy to meet with friends of my husband. Have him call my office to schedule an appointment." She got into her car, and it sped away into the night. But as she leaned back against the leather seat, the facade of calm dissolved. She allowed herself a single, silent tear, not of fear, but of a profound and bitter disappointment. She had fought a war and won, only to discover that her husband's final act of betrayal was to ensure that even in victory, she would never, ever be free of him. The battle for Hawthorne Holdings was over. But a new, more dangerous war had just begun. But Callie Hawthorne was not a woman who backed down from a fight. She had faced the vipers of Wall Street and won. This new threat, this ghost from Jason's past, was just another opponent on a different kind of chessboard. Not in a boardroom, but in a quiet, neutral art gallery in Geneva. Callie arrived not with lawyers, but with her son, Thomas, by her side. Volkov was as imposing as his reputation suggested, a man carved from Siberian granite. He expected fear, pleas, negotiations. He did not expect Callie's opening move. "Mr. Volkov," she began, her voice as cool and clear as the Swiss air, "I am aware of the Genesis transaction. I have the complete records. My audit was never about uncovering your business," Callie continued, "it was about cleaning my own house. However, in doing so, I found a significant liability on my books, my husband. She would bury the Genesis transaction forever, classifying it as a bad debt from a now-defunct shell corporation. And he would become a silent, but powerful, ally to the new Hawthorne holdings." Volkov was silent for a long moment, studying the woman before him. He saw not a victim, but a queen. He gave a slow, chilling smile. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said. "You have a deal." Weeks later, news reports surfaced of a boating accident near the Grenadines. A lone American financier, Jason Hawthorne, was reported missing, presumed dead. His gilded cage had become his watery grave. She had faced betrayal, corporate warfare, and the criminal underworld, and emerged stronger. The scars remained, but they were a reminder of the battles she had won. The name Hawthorne no longer stood for deceit, but for resilience. The story of Jason and Callie Hawthorne proves that in the end, you can't build an empire on a weak foundation. Justice, in one form or another, always finds a way. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss the next chapter from our channel. Let us know in the comments below.